A few weeks ago, out of my curiosity, I decided to ask Chat GPT for screenwriting advice, and I was shocked by the result, and I have to share them with you. Today's video is the part 2 of reacting to Chat GPT's screenwriting advice. If you haven't watched the part 1 of the video, you can click right, I think it's this way right here, and I'll also leave a link in the description down below so you can check it out. Part 1 have 5 advice from Chat GPT, and then I kind of elaborate a little bit on each advice with my own experience. And then today I'm going to elaborate on another 5 advice from Chat GPT about how to write a good screenplay. And let's just get this started. So Chat GPT screenwriting tip number 6: create compelling conflict. Introduce and escalate conflict throughout your screenplay. Conflict drives the story and creates tension and excitement. Give your character internal and external conflicts that they must face and overcome. Definitely, story is about conflict. Actually, in the end of screenwriting stage, I will do a conflict analysis for my own screenplay. So what I do is to go into the screenplay scene by scene to analyze what is the specific conflict within that scene. The conflict of each scene doesn't have to be the overall main conflict of the story itself, but it can be a conflict that supports the main conflict or a conflict that's branched out, as long as it's a conflict that moves in the story forward. And I also do this conflict analysis in my pre-production stage as directing notes. If you are interested, I can make a video on that, how I take notes for the screenplay as a director. So basically, analyze conflicts within each scene is how I prepare myself as a film director. And then those are the questions in general that I will ask myself. I'm not going to go too deep in there, but I'm going to give you a bullet point of the questions that I would ask myself. The first question I would ask myself is, who is driving the story in this scene? So basically, there are always someone within a scene that's a little bit proactive, and then the other person is a little bit passive. So who is actually driven all the main conflict and action in the scene? Who is actively pursuing within the scene? And then the second question, after I identify who is driving the scene, is to ask, what do they want? So what does he or she want in this scene? What's their goal? The goal can be the goal that they have for the entire story, but it also can be a more specific goal. So I'm going to use my film as an example again. The daughter in my film is someone who constantly wants to gain her mother's approval. I think that's an overall goal that she has in the story. But to a specific scene, for example, the scene that she took her mother into her house in the US for the first time, she only have one specific goal, is to set up her mother's room, the house, in the way that her mother likes, and then hopefully her mother can settle down and happy with everything. So that's her specific goal in that scene. So that's what I meant by, in every single scene there will be more specific goals that's branched out from the overall main goals of the story. So the third question to ask is, what's their obstacle within the scene? So in this case, this example that I just gave to you, this daughter's obstacle is her mother's disapproval of every effort that she put into for the specific room. In the story, the mother was complaining and being sarcastic about the efforts that she put into for her. So in that specific scene, her mother's attitude is kind of like an obstacle for her to get what she wants. So the obstacle doesn't really have to be an attitude, it could be anything else. For example, within that scene, there's another obstacle. The house the daughter is taking her mother in is not even her house, it's her boyfriend's house. Things like that can also make the situation a little bit more complex. So the fourth question to ask yourself is, who is the antagonist within the scene? He doesn't have to be the antagonist of the overall story, but every single scene there's an obstacle, there's an antagonist. And then the antagonist is the person who doing the push and the pull with the person who is actively driving the scene. And the next question to ask yourself is, what's the goal of the antagonist? A lot of the time they actually share the same goal of the person who is driving the scene, and that's how you're maximizing the conflict. If you can find a perspective to make your antagonist and the protagonist pursuing a similar goal, the conflict will be stronger. That's something that I learned from John Truby's book that I find is one of the most valuable lessons. To use the same example that I gave you. So the story is about the daughter have her way of living in the US, and she want her mother's approval of her living style. So she set up everything the best way she can for her mother, to welcome mother to her home, and she wants her mother's approval. The mother is constantly disapprove every effort that she's make. On the surface, the dynamic is about begging approval, disapproval, but in the sense, in the essence, what they want is to prove their way of living is the right way of living. So the daughter is trying to prove that her lifestyle is the right way of living. By proving that, she is setting up the house for her mother to make her mother comfortable, to basically showcase, hey, I can taking care of myself very well, and I can also taking care of you. But her mother have exactly the same goal. Her mother's way of living is more traditional. It's a way of want to basically respect the culture, things like that. And she disprove her daughter is her tactic of getting her goal, which is also prove her way of living is better than her daughter's way of living. I'm not sure if you watched my film yet. I hope all of these are sort of make sense to you. If you're interested in checking out the example, check out my film. The link is in the description down below, and then you can rent from Amazon or Apple, however you like. There are lots of platforms that you can check out the film. And then the last question to ask yourself in terms of conflict within a scene is, who won at the end? Who is winning their power dynamic game within the scene? Is something that you want to figure out for the scene in order to create a strong sense of aftertaste, and it's also help you to open another door for the next scene to try to build another conflict again. By identify who is winning within a scene can also help you balance out the character, the story overall a little bit. You don't want to consistently always the same person win throughout the entire movie. Every single scene they should have different people who is winning in that power dynamic. In that way, back and forth, you can build up that intense conflict throughout the entire movie. Screenwriting tips number 7 from Chat GPT. Maintain a strong pace. Keep the story moving forward and maintain an engaging pace. Balance the action scenes with quieter moments of character development. Avoid unnecessary scenes that do not contribute to the overall story. I'm so surprised the Chat GPT is giving this advice, because this is a thing that often not only overlooked by the screenwriters but also by the filmmakers. I certainly not doing very well on these tips myself. It's one of those things that's very obvious and very easy to understand, but it's very difficult to execute, especially on the filmmaking stage. Their films are very fast-paced throughout and they rarely have quieter moments. Even some of the blockbuster film you can see in the mainstream theaters that kind of give you that feeling, and as an audience you tend to feel exhausted and the information overload after you watch the film. Quieter moments, it's an introspective moment for your character, and it's an opportunity for you to kind of pace out the film as well as elaborate on the theme, echoing the theme for your audience, be able to reflecting the story for themselves as well. And it's very important to have those moments to get the emotional empathy out of the audience. I always think as a writer we should be able to step back looking at the entire screenplay and see it as a music piece. There will be fast-paced sections and there will be slow-paced sections, and in that way the pace will balancing itself out and then the entire music piece is more coherent. And about not having scenes in the movie that's unnecessary, that's not moving story forward, this is something I often do in the later stage of the screenwriting, sometimes even in the editing room, that I would rethink about the scene if the information the scene is presenting has been presented before, or if the conflict have exist before, or if the scene is actually giving you something to move in the story forward. A lot of the time it's very hard to identify because as a writer we might emotionally attach to certain emotions the character have and the character is presenting in this scene, or just something we really like about the scene, and it kind of really easy to blind our sight. It's really hard to see. I have to admit that I remember back then when I'm making my film, my editor insisted deleting a few scenes and I really didn't want to, and later she presented me a draft of the film that she deleted those scenes without telling me, and then the story's pace is much better and much more engaging, and I wasn't even aware that she deleted. I didn't miss it. Sometimes we have to find that balance. We need to emotionally engage with our writing, but also we need to be able to distance ourselves enough to make some more logistic decision of deleting things that's actually not really moving the story forward. Alright, Chat GPT writing tip number 8. Develop visual storytelling. Use visual cues, symbolism, and imagery to enhance the storytelling experience. Create vivid and cinematic description that allow the reader to visualize the scene and then connect with the emotion and the themes. Once again, I couldn't agree more. This is something I also need to remind myself to keep working on it more, because I felt when I look back to my feature film, I have visual cues and symbolism in the story, but not enough. Visual cue is a great opportunity to help you echoing the theme, pace out the story, set up the tone, and set up the emotion for the entire story. And I really think my feature film is sort of lack of that, and then that's probably one of the biggest lesson that I learned from making the film. I think it was because when I'm making the film I was more of dialogue focused. I think it depends on people's style. To me, description is quite important too, because I really like those moments that really you take your time to set up the scene, set up the environment for the story to happen. It really help you with the story tone a lot. But this is also something really hard to balance as a filmmaker and a screenwriter as well, because you don't also want to do too much of it. You don't want to overdo and make the story feel a little bit pretentious. Sometimes when people do it too much without having much information, or the story is not moving forward, the story start getting a little bit boring. So really needs to find the balance within your style. I think that's the key of it. That's something I need to keep working on. Alright, Chat GPT screenwriting tip number 9. Edit and revise. Writing a great screenplay often involves multiple drafts and revisions. Polish your screenplay by eliminating unnecessary scenes, improving dialogue, tightening the pacing, and refining the structure. Be open to feedback and seek input from others. There's never an ending of rewriting a screenplay until the film is complete. there's always a rewriting process, even in the pre-production, on set, during the production, or in the editing room. Be able to open up towards feedbacks and different possibilities is very important for writing a good screenplay. I always think screenwriting is not as personal as fictional writing. I feel like when I say this, some of you might get really mad at me, but I say that because I feel screenwriting is more of writing a guideline for a group of artists, a group of filmmakers who have their own skills and they are able to bring their own ideas based off this guideline to put it together into these projects. So it's a thing that created for other people's input to begin with. That's why I say it's less personal than fictional writing, whereas entire book would be more of coming out from our own mind. I understand it's very difficult in order to take feedbacks, and sometimes it's really hard to distinguish when to take a feedback and when to follow our heart. I'm quite interested in this topic. Maybe I should make a video about when to take feedback and when not to take feedback. Let me know if you are interested, I'll make it. And Chat GPT screenwriting tip number 10. Read and analyze screenplays. Study successful screenplays in your genre. Analyze how they handle structure, character development, dialogue, and pacing. Learn from the best and apply those insights in your own writing. I can't tell you how much I've learned from reading the screenplays, not only just for screenwriting itself, but for English as well. Y'all know English is not my first language, so I like to go into the screenplay to learn how to write beautiful visual descriptions. I wrote those sentences down in my notebook and trying to memorize them. So in that way, I can write a similar sentence too for my own screenplay. And also, I've learned so much about character development, knowing how they set up the story structures, things like that. I always feel screenplay is a form of art itself. It's quite enjoyable and really fun to read because they are such a visual kind of art, but also it's come from words. If you are interested in how I read a screenplay, you can watch this video by clicking right here. And thank you so much for being here. Remember to subscribe and be patient, be present, stay creative. I'll see you next week. Bye. Pew.